Hello everyone, and thanks for coming back to the channel. This is the Q58 from Quattrovolante. Running the Racer Star BR703 10,000 kV motors, Teeny 1S flight controller with an OSD, 4-amp all-in-one ESC, Rack-on Heli 41mm props, V1.2 all-in-one camera, and VTX. It does appear to be 58mm, carbon fibers measuring 1.58mm. It weighs 26.1 grams. I've been flying with these high voltage batteries. I want to give you some perspective of just how small this is, because it's one of the smallest that I've ever flown. It beats the Rack-on Heli that we did a few weeks ago by about 6mm, but the battery, this is the 255 milliamp Tiny Whoop battery. You might have one of those to compare around your house. This one is actually a really good battery. I've really been happy with these batteries. They say they're 260 mAh. I haven't really tested this to see how many we put back in after we deplete them. You do see that this port is a little bit crooked, though. I wonder if I damaged that. But this one is a little bit lighter. They might be kind of expensive, though, because I'm not sure they sell these by themselves. This is from FPV Model. This came with the brushed whoop that I flew a few weeks ago as well, but that gives you some idea of the dimensions. And also for perspective, we can compare it to the classic Tiny Whoop here. Try to get everything lined up here in the camera just so And because this is on top, it's going to actually look bigger, but it's not. But flying this was a lot of fun. I enjoyed this quite a bit. And there's sometimes when you get a vehicle that you really don't have to tune it much. You make little tweaks and it works out just, it feels perfect for you. And for me, this was one of those vehicles where I just made some really minor PID tweaks and it really felt like I could drive it pretty much wherever I wanted. And I flew it in the house all the time. And I kept flying this one, and then after maybe a day or two of flying this one, I would go back to flying the Racon Heli to see which one I like better, because I think that's what's going to come up as questions. And I like this one better. I don't know if it's the thrill of not having any hoops to protect, or if it just flies better myself. I'm leaning towards it just flies better. I think it's a more traditional quadcopter, and it flies with less resistance because you don't have hoops on it like this does. I do think there's a big difference between brushed and brushless, at least in my experience, is that short throttle punch, which I'm constantly doing. You're always just making little small adjustments, and I'm used to them responding in a particular way. And when I fly my brushed quads, like the Tiny Hoop, it just doesn't respond the same. It takes longer. It feels like you have to give it more throttle and you still don't get the response out you're looking for. And that's one of the things that I like about these tiny, tiny motors here in our brushless category. We don't have too many frames that have come about. There's a few, but working with these little components is quite fussy. And I should mention that this was also built by Adam Douglas. And unfortunately, Adam, I had to change out the camera because the other one wasn't focused. But between the time I sent Adam the parts and I got this back from him, it wasn't very long, but other stuff had arrived, so I had more cameras to use. At the time that I had Adam building this, I only had a few cameras with all the different wires. Oh, and I did lift a pad. You'll note back here, if we can get the camera to focus, hopefully. I did lift this pad, which is used for the OSD, so what I had to do was I had to just connect the two wires off the camera together in order to get video out of it. So even though you don't see video, you don't see OSD on the video, this board does support it, and so does this camera. But unfortunately, when I replaced the camera that was not focused, because I couldn't get the lens turned on, and ended up breaking that one all up, I had to go to a different camera, and I unfortunately lifted that pad. But I am using that Teeny 1S with OSD in there. And for some perspective on small, I also have the Q59, which is running 31 millimeter props, and I've flown them both, but I enjoy this one a lot more. And it might be because the geometry here, it just works better. But there's one thing for certain, is that we have the same motors on vehicles that weigh almost identically. So of course the vehicle with bigger props is going to give you more thrust, and therefore might be more fun. This one is built similarly, and I think you really want to build one of these if you're just going for the absolute smallest. If you just want to say, you know, I've got the smallest brushless on the market and I can FPV it, this would be the way to go. But I think if you want something that's more fun to fly, I think giving up a few millimeters and going with the 58 is going to be the way to go. I don't have any flight footage of the 49. I know it says 58 in the front. It's just because when I bought camera mounts, I bought two of these, and they are a little bit nicer in my opinion, and so Adam built those at my request with these particular camera mounts. There's other camera mounts that you can get off the Quattrovolante site, because I just didn't fly it very much. I did some tuning and it flew okay, and I was kind of happy with it, but this one was so much more fun that I just flew this one. Now when we fly it outside, it's dramatically different. You can really feel the fact that we're running little tiny motors and we've got these little tiny props. I think it's still way better than flying a brushed whoop outside, but it is a dramatically different feel. Inside, it feels very sporty. You can get amongst the furniture, and maybe you have a shop, or you have a workplace where you can do some of the same sort of things, or you have a house like mine where you tend to do a lot of flying in, or you have an armory where you have a fun flying in. Pretty much anywhere you might have an indoor flight, I would say this would be a pretty good candidate. And I was also worried about the durability of these motors, because we are exposed. You know, we can get more props and pop those on and off. And you can see I did change out two of the props because I just mangled those up. And this one's a little bit chipped itself too. But so far, these motors have been fine. I've probably had, I would have to estimate somewhere around 30 or 40 flights on this one itself. And, you know, I crash a lot. I try to always go faster than I probably can handle, and maybe I'm not having a very good day, or I'm feeling rushed and I crash. But anyway, so I crash a lot, so that's one thing I can always test for you is durability, and I can say that it's pretty durable. As far as the frame and the structure goes, the one tip I would give you is these nylon screws go down into this 3D printed piece, and of course, the most of the time when we crash, the camera is kind of involved in some capacity. Either we're hitting something with the camera, or we're catching a prop on something, and then we tumble over, and it does tumble over to the top quite a bit. And so I found that I think it's this one in the back. Yeah, you can't really tell right now. I've got it shoved down in there. These tend to come loose. The 3D print doesn't necessarily hold them in great. So you might want to take something and put a dab in there, maybe some hot glue, and if you can get it hot enough to where it stays there, get your nylon screw lined up, dab your hot glue, and then shove it down in there and screw it in. I think that will help it hold. That way, if it does come loose, it's got a little bit of extra material in there to grab a hold of. Whatever you can think of. I don't recommend anything permanent, because then you're going to have to order some more parts in order to get get things put back together again if you have a really bad crash. And we put a buzzer on this. This is the super tiny micro buzzer. So 26.1 grams with a buzzer. Isn't that something? When you pick your receiver, you're going to want to pick something that's under a gram, I think, where every gram counts. And if I recall correctly, yeah, this is the iRange RX803. I think that's what it's called. And it's a super tiny receiver, and it weighs, I think it's 0.5 or 0.6 grams, maybe as much as 0.8, but it's really small. And I had one on the channel, and I bought a few others specifically for purposes like this, where you have something that you're not going to probably fly far away from you, but you need the lightest possible receiver you can get. So that was a good candidate, and it fit nicely. If you can see it wrapped up down in there between our standoffs, because we just don't have much room. This machine's good fun. I enjoy it. I fly it quite a bit. And if you want to have something that's small and that you can fly around in your house, if you're willing to have something that you may end up burning through some props, depending upon your skill level, this one's good fun. You can take it outside and fly it. I don't think it's nearly the flyer that we have, when it comes to these motors, flying outside, it's regardless of the vehicle, it's just not going to feel very fast. Especially with the super wide angle camera, it's just not going to feel very fast. There's not much we can do about that. These motors, they run great, but they're just not producing that much thrust. They're tiny little motors, but they do produce more thrust than, say, the typical brushed micro. Speaking of brushed micros, I'll give you a little bit of history on me here. So this is one of my first FPV micros. And this is a polycarbonate frame from Dave Woods of Picnic Quads. And I actually bought this little assembly. This is what we used to have to do. You had to make an FPV backpack. And this one was made by Gnarly. And I think he's moved on to other projects as all-in-ones have become so much more popular. But look at that. This was our backpack. We had to manually put it together. And now it's down to 3.5 grams. Whereas this one weighed, I think it was around 8 or 9 grams, maybe even 10. Does have a circular polarized on there, and then we have the old Seisky board on top. We always had problems with getting clean video, so we had to use voltage regulators in order to make sure we had clean video. But this is how I got started. And oftentimes when I think of my brush flight, I'm comparing it back to this vehicle, which isn't all that light, but it does fly pretty well. These are hubs and props. So when I talk about brush flight, this is kind of my reference point. It's about 2 years ago now, maybe 18 months. And we had a lot of work to do in order to get everything working just right. And it's ugly, and it's been beat up, but it served me well, and it helped me get on a path. So it doesn't matter what you start with. Start with something, have fun, fly often, enjoy yourself, share the hobby with others. And this is something you can surely fly around in your office. If you have any comments, questions, suggestions, or otherwise, please leave those down in the section down below. You should probably hear from Adam down in the comments below. He built this for me. He offers a build service. I know that he builds almost every day, and I think it was in a video or two ago I also talked about Adam Build. And I do that a lot because, one, Adam seems like a good dude, and he's trying to make a living, I think, building quads. And he does a nice job. He communicates well. He lets you know where his things are standing. He sends you pictures along the build line, so you don't have that feeling of, I wonder if it's really getting built. I think Adam's been building for a lot of people. I think a lot of people on the Facebook micro brushless group can vouch for him. So he's ADAMBOMBFPV. You can look him up on Facebook. I'll look up his Facebook below. He's also got a YouTube channel. I'll look that up and I'll put that in the description down below. Flight Test has a build service, but I think they only build the stuff they sell. I always encourage people to build things, because eventually you're going to need to know how these components work. Something's going to fail, something's going to break. You're going to need to know how to troubleshoot it, how to fix it. We do those things here on YouTube. I've got a number of tutorials on fixing stuff. Okay, that's all I have. Thank you for watching.